Hey guys, tonight we're gliding through olive groves where cicadas hum and the scent of crushed grapes clings to the summer air. You duck under gnarled branches heavy with fruit barefoot on warm, dusty soil. Somewhere ahead, a figure waits in the vineyard, bare-chested, crowned in ivy eyes, too old for his youthful smile. That's Dionysus. Yes, the wine god. Yes, the dolphin one. And no, you probably won't survive this if you expect any of it to make sense. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're winding down. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You settle into a quiet patch of grass just outside the vineyard. The moon hovers low like it's eavesdropping. Dionysus leans against a fig tree, lazily tracing shapes in the dirt with a vine-twined stick, and begins not with pirates, not with dolphins, but with his origin story. Because, of course, the wine god has a chaotic backstory. All gods do. But his starts with infidelity, fire, and a uterus. Semele is his mother, a mortal princess of Thebes, beautiful, clever, and unfortunately dating Zeus. As in the king of gods. As in the guy with a reputation for knocking up mortals disguised as geese, golden rain, and other red flag nonsense. Hera, Zeus's actual wife and eternal grudge holder, finds out. Because of course she does. And instead of confronting her philandering husband, classic avoidance, she goes straight for the girlfriend. Hera, masked in kind old woman drag, befriends Semele and gently seeds doubt if Zeus really loves you. Why doesn't he visit in his full divine form? Semele, naive and pregnant, demands Zeus show her the truth. Zeus, bound by an unbreakable promise, does. It goes badly. He appears in his full thunder and glory god mode. Semele combusts instantly, like mythological fireworks, gone. But in the microseconds before that, Zeus snatches the fetus from her incinerated womb, slices open his thigh because why not, and shoves the baby in. Yes, into his leg. You don't really get a say in whether you're ready for this, do you? A few months later, thigh baby Dionysus is born. Fully cooked, apparently. The only Olympian with two births, one from a mortal woman, one from a god's meaty thigh pocket. Historians still argue whether this story symbolized resurrection duality or just Greek mythology being extra again. So now you're lying in the vineyard listening to a twice-born toddler god gurgle with laughter. His hair curls like new vines, and he smells like wild honey and crushed thyme. His foster mothers are the nymphs of Mount Nisa, mystical babysitters with a knack for lullabies and light parenting. They teach him to walk, to dance, and most importantly, to ferment. And what does a baby god of wine do once he's mobile? He wanders. A lot. You imagine a barefoot toddler tottering across Anatolia with a wineskin slung over one shoulder and a pine cone rattle in the other. Every town he stumbles into ends up tipsy and confused. There are echoes of this in old Hittite records. Wild parties, ritual frenzies, animal masks. Fringe historians believe Dionysus was a syncretic blend of Near Eastern gods, absorbed into Greece like a fermented smoothie of myths. But right now, in the silence of this sleepy vineyard, none of that matters. You watch Dionysus press his cheek to a ripening cluster of grapes and sigh, like he's already seen how the story ends. There's a weariness behind his soft smile. A god made of contradiction, joy and madness, nectar and poison. A donkey brays somewhere in the distance. You turn your head, the moon shifts, the vines rustle. Dionysus whispers something to the night air, maybe a blessing, maybe a warning. You can't tell. His voice is like warm wine in your ears. You lie back on the grass, eyes heavy, thoughts fogging over like chilled glass. Somewhere nearby, a satyr giggles in its sleep. And this, you realize, is how it begins, not with dolphins, not with pirates, but with a fireborn god who just wants someone to believe he's real. You wake, or at least drift upward into something like wakefulness as the ground beneath you changes. The vineyard has faded into something drier, more open. The air smells faintly of myrrh and mountain thyme. You're following Dionysus now, but he's older. Barefoot still, but with a swagger. His curls longer, his voice deeper, his aura. A little more I might befriend you or destroy you depending on the vibe. He walks ahead through a dusty goat path, occasionally sipping from a cup that never empties. And tonight, he's in a storytelling mood. You don't interrupt. You just keep close the warmth of his presence like a flickering campfire. He tells you about being twice born. Not as a boast, more like a shrug. First, from a mortal who loved too hard, he mutters, and then from a god who panicked. That's how he puts it. Zeus loved his mortal mistress, but not enough to protect her properly. Loved his unborn son, but not enough to raise him. So Dionysus was passed off like a glowing hot potato, from gods to nymphs, from nymphs to wandering sages, from sages to himself. You learn that Dio was a lonely kid. Not for lack of attention, mortals flocked to him. Animals followed him. Even plants seemed to twist toward him like fans desperate for an autograph. But they didn't see him, not as a god, not truly. To most Greeks, Dionysus wasn't an Olympian. He didn't live on Mount Olympus, no golden throne, no thunderbolts or tridents or owl sidekicks. Instead, he crashed in forests, hung out with satyrs, threw midnight raves, and handed out wine like party favors. His worship looked more like a music festival than a temple ceremony. Historians still argue whether this was because his cult was imported. Some claim Dionysus came from Thrace, others from Phrygia, others still from India. The truth is, nobody agrees, and that makes Dionysus all the more fascinating. He's the god of things that can't be pinned down, wine madness, transformation theater, the moment just before a dream turns strange. But gods, especially ones with unstable vibes, don't get accepted easily. You walk with him through ancient Thebes. The streets feel uneasy beneath your feet. Here, he tried to convince people he was divine. Instead, they mocked him, locked him up, tried to beat the miracle out of him. You glance at Dionysus. Now he's quiet, his eyes cloudy like a storm is brewing just behind the iris. He doesn't speak of vengeance, not yet, but you can feel it in the air, like static, like the moment just before the wine sours. He continues on. You pass a group of Maenads, his female followers, dancing in a circle. Their feet kick up dust and petals. Their hair is wild, their eyes wilder. They worship him with drums and ecstatic spinning. And you think this isn't the kind of worship a god gets in marble temples. This is raw, animal, beautiful, terrifying. You finally reach a cliffside camp overlooking the sea. Dionysus slouches on a rock, drinks again from his ever-full cup, and says softly, "They only believed when the world bent to prove it." He's talking about the pirates now, you think. But that story comes later. For now, he shares a fringe detail, the kind most people forget. That before he ever met those pirates, Dionysus spent years drifting across lands as a mortal. Or at least pretending to be one. He went east, far east. Some say as far as India. Others claim he wandered into Mesopotamia, introduced wine to Babylon, and danced through Zoroastrian temples. There's even one dusty inscription, half-broken tablet, half-wishful thinking, that refers to a wine-bringer with ivy tattoos and a leopard cloak entering the court of a Persian king. Could have been him. Could have been a coincidence. Could have been a very committed wine merchant. Theories pile up. Was Dionysus a real cult leader? A metaphor for fermentation? An ancient psychedelic gone viral? You don't care. Not really. Right now, you just care about the gentle waves below and the god beside you humming a forgotten melody. The stars blur above. The breeze smells faintly of pine sap and fermented honey. Dionysus leans in, smirks, like he knows what dream you're having, and says, "They never really wanted gods. They just wanted stories. You don't respond, your eyelids are heavy, your heartbeat is slow, and for now that's enough. You wake sort of to the rhythm of footsteps crunching over dried leaves and gravel. Dionysus is already moving again. His leopard print cloak flutters behind him like a theater curtain. You yawn and follow, still a little dazed, still caught between the olive-scented vineyard of earlier and wherever this next memory is taking you. Turns out, Asia. You trail behind him as the scenery shifts once again. The skies brighten with strange constellations. Palm trees emerge where there should be pine. The earth grows red and cracked beneath your feet. You're not in Greece anymore. You're on Dionysus's long wine-soaked backpacking trip across what modern historians call the East. And yes, there are receipts. Not literally, of course. The Greeks didn't leave Yelp reviews. But there are carvings, inscriptions, and echoes in strange, distant places that whisper of a foreign god who traveled with a retinue of pan flute players and drunken animals. He starts in Phrygia, where he's taught sacred rites by the mother goddess Cybele. That's when things get weird. Or weirder. Cybele's cult is loud, percussive, frenzied. Worshippers beat drums and whip themselves into trances. Dionysus, still a young god in progress, observes, learns, and adapts. This is where he picks up the gift of ecstatic transformation, the ability to make mortals lose themselves in something greater or stranger or wilder than they are. You watch as his traveling band grows. A caravan of dancers, flute players, satyrs, and beasts. Panthers pad beside donkeys. A goat wears gold earrings. Someone is definitely playing cymbals. You can smell the wine from half a mile away. They march eastward. Thrace, Lydia, into Persia. There are whispers, half myth, half hope, that Dionysus reached the Indus River. That he introduced wine cultivation to the foothills of the Himalayas. That he founded entire cities later forgotten, filled with ivy-covered altars and hot spring festivals that never quite stopped. Historians still argue whether any of this actually happened. Some say it's poetic metaphor, a way of explaining how winemaking spread from Mesopotamia outward. Others say it was a theatrical frame story performed annually by Greek actors in goatskin masks. And then there's that one rogue theory involving mushrooms, desert isolation, and a camel caravan with really loose boundaries. But here's the thing. To Dionysus, truth is less important than belief. You sit beside him one night by a fire on the Bactrian plain. The wind whistles like a pan flute. One of the satyrs is trying to roast dates without burning them. Dionysus tells a joke that doesn't make sense and everyone laughs anyway. You ask him quietly because the others are asleep why he travels so far from home. He swirls his cup, looks into the wine like it's a mirror, and says, because it's harder to doubt a stranger bearing gifts. He means wine, obviously, but also mystery, ecstasy, permission to dance wildly when your culture tells you to sit still and behave. He brings chaos, yes, but also release. You walk again the next day up winding hills and across ruined roads. You pass temples that smell of cinnamon bark and ash. You see a child offer Dionysus a garland of blue lotus flowers. You see the god pause, genuinely surprised, touched even. You start to notice a pattern. Wherever he goes, people respond in extremes. Some kneel, some flee, some break into tears. No one shrugs. He's a mirror for their longing, their joy, their fear of losing control. One night while camped by a lake in Anatolia, Dionysus transforms a puddle into wine with a flick of his hand, just to see if you're still watching. A frog nearby drinks some, immediately falls over, snores. You giggle. He grins. That one gets it. It's easy to forget amid the divine powers and wild stories that Dionysus is young. Younger than Apollo, younger than Athena. He's still learning what it means to be worshipped, to be feared, to be loved for something other than your tricks. You sleep that night beneath unfamiliar stars, lulled by the sounds of goats chewing grass and flutes fading on the wind. Somewhere in your dream, a wine cup floats across a quiet pond. And for a moment, you believe in him completely. The sun rises slow and syrupy across the sea of hills, but Dionysus is already walking, already humming, already pretending he isn't glowing slightly in the early light. You rub your eyes and catch up. Today, he's headed home, or at least back west. The foreign lands have shaped him, filled out his myth, but in Greece, people still don't quite know what to do with him. That's the thing about gods who change shape. Mortals prefer consistency. You can build a temple to Zeus after all. You know what you're getting, lightning beard's oaths, but Dionysus, he could arrive as a handsome traveler, or a masked performer, or a giggling boy with too much wine and a leopard on a leash. Or he could show up barefoot in your village square, and you'd think he was just another drunk trying to sell stories. And that's exactly what happens. You drift behind him into the bustling port city of Naxos. The docks smell like salt and olives. Sailors shout. Markets hum. And there's Dionysus, newly arrived, looking not at all divine. No aura, no glowing crown. Just a tanned young man with wild curls and an unshakable smirk, quietly sipping from a cup no one realizes never empties. You wonder why he doesn't just announce himself. Hey, God here, worship time, but no, that's not his style. He waits. He watches. And as usual, people miss it. In Naxos, he's mistaken for a lost noble, or a wandering performer, or in one particularly bold merchant's case, a scam artist. He asks for wine. They scoff. He offers to pay in miracles. They laugh. He gets silence. He smiles wider. You trail him as he strolls through a crowded tavern. No one bows. No one even lifts their head. You start to feel uncomfortable on his behalf. Not because he wants worship exactly, but because being unseen after all he's done, that stings. Historians still argue why Dionysus wasn't accepted right away by the Greeks. Some say his cult was too foreign, too Eastern, too ecstatic, too loud. Others say it was class-based. His rites appealed more to women slaves and outsiders, which made elite male society nervous. And then there's the most human theory: he just didn't fit the mold. Zeus was sky. Poseidon was sea. Hades was death. But Dionysus, he was everything that slips between those things. Sleep, laughter, madness, the moment right before a decision when you could still say no. You follow him one evening to a theater. It's half-built, still crumbling in places. The marble seats are dusty. No crowd yet. Dionysus walks onto the stage, no script, no costume, and begins to speak. A monologue, improvised, dreamy. He tells the story of a god who's born twice, travels far, returns home, and is mistaken for a man. He mimics their laughter, their doubt, their shrugs. He does it so well it hurts. You sit alone in the back row listening as ivy vines curl up the stage's edge. No one else comes? It doesn't matter. The next morning, a few townsfolk claim the sea tasted sweet. Others say they dreamed of dancing women and golden lions. One boy insists he saw grapes growing out of a boat. No one connects it to Dionysus, and still he doesn't punish. Not yet. He just moves on. You walk with him up a narrow cliff road. A donkey follows, dragging a cart of amphorae that clink with every step. The ocean glimmers below like it's waiting. Dionysus pauses, tilts his head toward the horizon, and says, "They don't need to believe. Just remember, you don't ask what that means, because you already do. You don't notice the shift at first. One moment you're following Dionysus up a dusty trail lined with cypress trees. The next, he's disappeared behind a curtain of mist. You step through, and suddenly everything smells like overripe figs and warm honey. Welcome to his vibe shift. He's dressed differently now. Gone is the dusty traveler look. In its place, drama. His robes shimmer like spilled wine. His hair is tied up in loose braids threaded with ivy. On his shoulders, the unmistakable pelt of a leopard drapes like a fashion statement with teeth. And in his hand, of course, a staff tipped with a pine cone trailing ribbons and vine leaves. You blink. He sees you and twirls the thyrsus like a baton. Too much, he asks, eyebrows raised. You don't answer. You're too distracted by the small crowd now gathering behind him. Satyr's Maenads. A goat that may or may not be wearing eyeliner. The air is pulsing with drum beats distant and rhythmic, like a heartbeat you didn't know was yours. This is Dionysus in full god mode, and this is his look. The thing is, Dionysus didn't do solemn worship. He didn't require temples made of stone or priests in clean robes. He preferred parties that bordered on divine possession. Music, dance, revelry, these were his rituals. People didn't bow, they whirled. They didn't kneel, they shrieked, sang, drank, wept, and sometimes collapsed in fields under full moons. You start to understand why polite Greek society was terrified of him. Historians still argue whether Dionysian rites were religious experiences or just very well-organized raves. Some think the Maenads, his female followers, got high on herbal concoctions and wandered into the woods to scream at trees and tear apart imaginary wolves. Others argue these rituals were liberation spaces for women, slaves, and outsiders to express freedom denied to them in daily life. Both theories might be true, or neither. But right now, you're watching it unfold. A Maenad offers you a crown of ivy. A satyr hands you a clay cup that never empties. A flute melody rises in the distance, winding through the trees like smoke. Dionysus leads the procession. Not from the front, but from the middle. He dances among them, laughs when someone stumbles, lends a shoulder, spins in circles. He's a god who isn't above the people but among them. It's disarming and wildly effective. You pause on the edge of the gathering, noticing how even the animals are caught in the rhythm. Birds chirp on beat. Bees move in hexagonal formation. A squirrel is breakdancing. Okay, maybe not breakdancing, but it's doing something. You think back to Apollo, god of reason, logic, music, that's math with a melody. Apollo's the guy you bring to a dinner party if you want debate. Dionysus. You bring him if you want to wake up on a rooftop at sunrise wearing someone else's toga and singing about figs. The Greeks naturally had issues with this. Athens in particular had a rocky relationship with Dionysus. One year they banned his rites altogether. The next year, a plague hit. Coincidence? The priests didn't think so. Suddenly there were temples again, drama festivals, public drunkenness framed as civic duty. One mainstream historical fact: the origins of Greek theater are directly tied to Dionysus. Every spring, the city of Athens held the Dionysia, a days-long celebration featuring parades, performances, and competitive playwriting. Yes, the tragedies of Sophocles and Euripides, all performed for Dionysus. You picture him lounging in the front row, sipping wine, judging the lighting choices. And what about the pine cone staff, the thyrsus? Fringe historians believe it was more than decorative. Some think it symbolized fertility. Others argue it was used as a psychedelic delivery system, hollow inside, maybe packed with herbs, maybe dipped in fermented honey. That's never been confirmed, but come on. A pine cone stick carried by the god of altered states? You raise one eyebrow. Dionysus just winks. The sun begins to set. The dancing slows. The laughter grows quieter. And for a moment the grove is still. You lie back in the grass, head spinning. Ivy crowns tickle your cheeks. Somewhere above, stars begin to peek through. Dionysus walks past you slowly, Thyrsus trailing behind him like a tail. Now he says with a grin, "Let's see what happens when sailors get too confident." You're not sure what that means yet, but you will. The sea is silver this morning, glassy, gentle, quiet. You find yourself perched on a rocky shoreline, knees tucked to your chest, watching waves nudge pebbles like they're sorting their thoughts. Dionysus stands a few steps behind you barefoot again, robes looser, now sleeves rolled up like he's about to do something suspicious. He doesn't speak, just points. A ship drifts into view, and just like that the pirates arrive. They don't look like much, honestly. The kind of seafarers who talk big in dockside taverns but eat stale bread and never wash their ropes. They're Tyrrhenians from the Italian side of the sea. Traders, sometimes thieves when it suits them, professional opportunists always. From their distance, Dionysus must look like a lone rich kid wandering the shore in expensive clothes. Jackpot. You can practically hear the greedy mental math. Fancy robe. Probably gold underneath. We'll grab him, ransom him, easy coin. You glance at Dionysus. He smiles. Not a worried smile, more like someone who knows a prank is about to land. The pirates pull up fast, shouting, tossing down a ladder. You notice the helmsman hesitating. A gray-bearded man with calloused hands and tired eyes. He squints at Dionysus a little too long, frowns, but the others ignore him. They drag Dionysus aboard with grins like wolves at a bakery. You're now on the deck, unseen somehow, just observing. The ship creaks beneath your feet. The ropes groan. The air smells like sweat and mildew and dried squid. The pirates try to tie him up. This is where things should get messy, flailing fighting demands. But no. The ropes slip from Dionysus like they're made of butter. Every time they tighten a knot, it unravels. They blame the wind, the damp, one another. They argue in circles while Dionysus just sits there, placid, cross-legged, smiling, like someone listening to a story he already knows the ending to. The helmsman clears his throat. "This isn't right," he says. "We should let him go." The captain laughs. "What's scared of a pretty boy with a stick?" The helmsman looks at Dionysus again. "Sees something, maybe nothing, maybe everything." Historians still debate the origin of this myth. Was it a moral parable? A symbolic drama performed during sea festivals? Some think it was meant to explain dolphins as sacred animals. Others say it was theater, pure entertainment with just enough religion baked in to pass the censors. One theory, a little weirder, suggests this was a metaphor for the dangers of greed, or intoxication, or disrespecting art itself. You, however, are just trying to keep your balance as the ship begins to shift beneath you. Because now things start to change. Vines, yes, actual ivy vines begin to curl from the mast. Slow at first, then faster. Green tendrils twist around, ropes bloom from planks, snake into crevices. The sails ripple like they've caught a phantom wind. The air smells suddenly of wine, and the oars, they drip sap. The pirates notice. Late, of course. They stare at the growing plants like they've never seen nature before. One pokes a leaf, it hisses, and then the floor begins to bleed wine. Yes. Actual red wine seeps from the deck boards, bubbling in puddles that smell like crushed grapes and menace. Someone screams. Someone slips. Someone swears. Someone else laughs nervously, like maybe this is all some very immersive prank. You look at Dionysus. He hasn't moved, still seated, still serene. But there's a flicker in his eyes now. A flicker that says, you had your chance. And just when the panic starts to rise, a bear appears. Not walks in. Appears. Middle of the deck, full grown, roaring. And oh, now the panic kicks in properly. The pirates scatter. One grabs an oar. Another dives behind a barrel. The captain shouts something unintelligible about Poseidon's wrath. The bear roars again. The vines snap taut like angry ropes. Dionysus finally stands. He grows taller, brighter. His robes shimmer with stars. The pine cone staff bursts into flame, not fire exactly, more like radiant golden sparks. The pirates stop in their tracks. Because suddenly, it is very obvious that they are not dealing with a nobleman. They are dealing with a god. The bear lunges. The vines constrict. The wine boils. The air pulses like a drumbeat. And one by one, they jump. Overboard, into the sea, splash after splash. Screams cut short by salt water. And then mid-ear, mid-scream, they change. Their legs vanish. Their backs curve. Their skin shines. They hit the water, not as men, but as dolphins. Sleek, silver, laughing shapes that dart beneath the ship like joyful, guilty memories. All except one. The helmsman. He stays. Still at the rudder, pale, silent. Dionysus turns to him and nods. You watch as the god shrinks back to his normal form, smile returning. The bear disappears, the vines loosen, the wine, well, it stays. Because why waste a good vintage? The helmsman exhales slowly. He nods back, and the ship sails on. The sea rocks gently now like it's proud of itself for pulling off such a dramatic transformation sequence. You sit on the deck beside Dionysus, the floor still sticky with spilled wine and crushed ivy leaves. The ship glides across the waves peaceful now, though a little more haunted than before. You peek over the side. There they are, the dolphins. They leap, they spiral, they dive with glee. No trace of the ragged pirates. They were no growling, no greed, no confusion, just laughter. Not human laughter exactly, but something close. The sound of joy that forgot where it came from. The sound of what it's like to be free from yourself. You glance at Dionysus. He watches them too quietly. You ask the question hanging in the salty air. Why dolphins? He turns to you, lips curled slightly. Because it's better than what I could have done. You shiver despite the sun. Historians, for the record, are still arguing over this choice. In most versions of the myth, the pirates aren't punished in the way Greek myths usually go. No burning, no dismemberment, no eternal torment, rolling boulders uphill. They're transformed, released, rewritten. Some scholars say it's an act of mercy. Others say it's irony they wanted to control him. Now they're stuck dancing to his waves forever. One strange theory found in a crumbling commentary from the 3rd century BCE suggests dolphins were considered almost human-wise but mute, trapped in a form close to their old selves but unable to explain what they've lost. You feel it now, that blurry sadness tucked inside their joyful arcs, like dreamers who forgot their names mid-flight. Still, the Greeks didn't hate dolphins. Far from it. They carved them on coins, painted them on pottery, told tales of them saving drowning poets and playing beside Apollo. Sailors believed dolphins meant safe passage, a good omen, sometimes even a message from the gods. And now you know why. Because once upon a time, a god of wine and vengeance gave his enemies a second chance. Not as men, but as something softer, something silver and fast and fluid. Something forgiven. The helmsman, still at the rudder, clears his throat. Dionysus looks at him and says gently, "You spoke up, you tried, and that's it. No crown, no divine promotion, no lightning-struck medal, just that. You suspect that's the real reward." The ship drifts toward an island, now low hills, fig trees, white sand. Naxos, maybe, or some dream version of it. Dionysus sighs, stretches, and shakes the last ivy from his hair. His pine-cone staff is just a stick again. His robe, simple, soft linen. He looks tired, not exhausted, not broken, just a little more god than man again. You wonder what it's like holding that kind of power, being mistaken for a mortal, then proving otherwise. You wonder if it's lonely. Dionysus doesn't say. Instead, he hops off of the ship with a splash and wanders up the beach whistling. You watch him go, the breeze tugging gently at your sleeves, and suddenly realize the dolphins have followed. They bob beside the hull watching too, as if waiting, or maybe mourning, or maybe just curious about where stories go when they're over. The helmsman ties off the ropes, gives you a soft nod, doesn't speak. And somewhere out in the distance beneath the clear blue waves, the once pirates spin and play and leap. You lie back against the warm deck wood. Close your eyes. Let the motion of the sea cradle you. You don't know yet that this story will ripple through centuries. You don't know that somewhere, thousands of years from now, people will still paint dolphins leaping beside wine-dark ships. But Dionysus does. He always did. The island air is heavier now. Not humid, just thick with the scent of figs ripening on the branch salt clinging to rocks, and something headier satisfaction, maybe, or mischief. You follow Dionysus inland along a winding trail, sandals scraping soft gravel, as seabirds wheel silently overhead like gossiping witnesses, the pirates. Now dolphins are gone from view, their silhouettes flickering beneath the surface like fading thoughts. The sea has resumed its steady rhythm, and so has Dionysus. He hums, no song you recognize. Just a lazy tune that makes the vines along the trail perk up and sway a little. You think you hear drums in the distance, but it could just be your heartbeat catching the rhythm of this strange god's steps. He leads you to a clearing. The earth here is soft, sun-warmed, blanketed in wild thyme and purple clover. He flops down like a kid at a picnic and stretches out his limbs. For a moment, he's just a man lying in the grass. Then the vines creep toward him again, wrapping his ankles gently like a lover who missed him. You sit beside him, and that's when he tells you what happened next. Because yes, the pirates leapt. Yes, they transformed. But not before Dionysus showed them exactly why they shouldn't have tied up a god. The vines on the ship didn't just bloom, they grew mouths, eyes, whispered secrets in ancient tongues. The wine didn't just flow, it foamed and giggled and then hissed and then filled their lungs. The bear wasn't alone. A panther joined. A serpent danced on the rails. And in that moment, every pirate knew this wasn't just about theft. This was about disrespect. And Dionysus, he doesn't take kindly to that. You remember earlier the Maenads, the frenzied joy, the masks of laughter. But beneath all that celebration is a thin, sharp line of something darker. Something that smells like old blood on olive bark. Because ecstasy pushed too far always flips. That's the lesson. Historians often skip over this duality. They like their gods. Neat, Zeus thunders, Athena strategizes, Hades broods. But Dionysus, he's joy and madness. He frees you and undoes you. He lifts you into divine release, and if you resist, he'll twist your world until it sings. One fringe tidbit lost in dusty scrolls describes how some Dionysian rites ended with theater masks cracked in half and dancers laughing themselves hoarse, unable to stop. The priestesses called it the wine's revenge. Modern scholars think it was hysteria, or heat stroke, or maybe just too much belief. Dionysus plucks a clover and places it behind your ear. People always think I'm kind, he says softly. They forget what happens when the music stops. You lie back and watch clouds drift across the sky like lazy gods pretending not to watch mortals suffer. He tells you one more thing, that not all the pirates changed. There was one who resisted even after the rest had jumped. He clung to the mast sobbing. Dionysus offered him a choice: let go and become something new, or stay and live with what he'd seen. He stayed. He died days later. No marks, just empty. You ask if that's worse. Dionysus doesn't answer. The wind picks up, carries seeds through the air. A swirl of purple petals lands in your lap, light as whispers. You sit in the grass until your breath slows to match the rustling of the leaves. Dionysus lies still. Eyes closed, lips parted just slightly in a half-smile, like he's dreaming of something you'll never quite understand. And beneath the calm, the vines still move, just a little, just enough to remind you, this god is never really sleeping. It's later now. Hard to say how much. Time drips slower here, like old honey. You find yourself walking again barefoot through soft moss as the island fades into a sea of quiet. Dionysus is ahead, half hidden by olive trees, trailing his fingers along the trunks like he's greeting old friends. You pause. Because something's changed again. The laughter's gone. The vines have calmed. The colors feel muted. The god isn't dancing anymore. He's remembering, and you are too. That moment on the ship, the transformation, the splash, the silver flashes, the dolphins. Let's go back there for a second. You lean over the railing once more. The water's clearer in memory than it ever is in life. You see them now, dolphins, swirling sleek and fast, cutting the waves like knives made of moonlight. They weren't always sacred. Not until this. Before Dionysus, dolphins were just another sea creature. Useful, sure. Pretty, maybe. But not divine. After, they were everywhere. Carved into temple walls. Painted on the sides of urns. Spun into myths like golden thread. Sailors told stories of dolphins rescuing drowning poets, ferrying shipwrecked heroes to shore. Even the great poet Arion, thrown overboard by his own crew, was said to be carried home by one. Historians still argue how much of this was inspired by the Dionysus story and how much came before. Did the god elevate the animal, or did he borrow its meaning, wrapping his revenge in the shape of something already magical? Some say the Greeks admired dolphins because they seemed so human. They breathed air, traveled in groups, helped one another. They played, they mourned, they smiled. One fringe theory claims dolphins were once humans themselves in more than one myth. Sailors, lovers, musicians, even entire villages turned into sea creatures either as punishment or escape. A divine loophole for those who didn't fit the world they were born into. And in this story, Dionysus doesn't destroy his enemies. He recycles them. You and the gods sit now on a stone overlooking the water. It's quiet. A few gulls wheel overhead. Below the dolphin's surface, leap, vanish. They're not trying to return. They're not seeking forgiveness. They're just being. Dionysus sighs. They never thanked me. You glance over, unsure if he's joking. He is, mostly. Still, there's something in his voice, not regret, but wait. You realize something else now. Transformation is not always a gift. It can be a sentence, an escape, a rebirth, or all three. The pirates were spared, but they were also erased. That's the part no one talks about. They jumped as men. They surfaced as myth. Dionysus pulls a grape from somewhere. He always has one and pops it in his mouth. He doesn't offer you one. Just gives you a knowing look like you've had enough. You lie back on the stone. Let the wind thread through your hair. The dolphins swim close now, just offshore. One leaps, spins midair like it's showing off. You swear it winks. You smile. Maybe they're happy. Maybe they forgot. Maybe forgetting is the point. You ask Dionysus, do they remember who they were? He doesn't answer. But the sea hums something soft beneath your feet. And you start to wonder, maybe they don't need to. The day folds gently into dusk and the sky melts into lavender and brass. The dolphins have disappeared now somewhere beneath the waves, chasing dreams of coral and silence. You're walking inland again, uphill this time. The path is lined with time and flaking stone. Dionysus doesn't lead you anymore. He walks beside you, and he's quieter. Not solemn exactly, just still, like a campfire that's burned low but still smolders warm beneath its ash. You feel it too, that ache of the story shifting from climax to consequence. Not everyone jumped, he says suddenly. You nod. He's talking about the helmsman, the one who saw, the one who warned them, the one who didn't leap. You remember him, hands steady on the rudder mouth, tight with worry. While the others cracked jokes and tied ropes, he looked twice, saw what shimmered beneath the god's disguise. And now he lives, sort of. After the ship docked, the helmsman left. Didn't take gold, didn't ask questions. He simply walked away from the crew that was no longer a crew from the ship that had sailed too close to the edge of myth. He became the footnote, the exception. And Dionysus, he let him go. Historians love the helmsman. They write essays about him. Was he a moral compass? A narrative device? A stand-in for the audience? Someone who almost messed up but didn't. Some claim he was a real person, a sailor from the island of Lesbos, whose grave was marked with vines and dolphins. No one agrees. Fringe mythographers insist the helmsman wasn't spared for his virtue, but for his use, that he went on to ferry Dionysus through other stories, guiding his boat down the Nile across the Hellespont, even into the underworld. You find that hard to believe, mostly because Dionysus doesn't strike you as someone who asks for directions. You arrive now at a shrine, half-built, half-crumbled, covered in ivy, of course. No roof, no door, just a circle of worn marble columns and a stone basin still stained purple with ancient wine. Offerings sit along the edge, grapes. Coins, seashells. Someone left a carved dolphin figurine. Dionysus stops, runs his fingers over the dolphin, smiles faintly. This is where they remember, he says. The ones who listened. And you realize he doesn't mean the pirates. He means you. He kneels. Not to pray, but to rest. Leaning back on one elbow, he looks up at the fading sky. You ask why he didn't do more. Why he let the pirates live at all. Why he turned vengeance into dolphins instead of fire. He picks a fig from a nearby branch and shrugs. What's more annoying than letting someone live forever surrounded by joy, knowing they once tried to steal it? You laugh. He grins. But behind it, there's truth. Deep and golden. Because Dionysus doesn't destroy, he transforms. You sit with that for a while. Let the night gather its breath. Crickets start to sing. A breeze rolls through, smelling of fermented fruit and seawater. Somewhere in the dark, a panther yawns. The helmsman is long gone. But the ship he steered sails on in stories and paintings and dreams. He chose stillness, he chose witness. And in doing so, he became something rare in mythology, a mortal who saw a god and lived. You lie back beside Dionysus. Watch stars poke holes through the velvet sky. Your thoughts drift like boats in gentle current. One of the stars moves, no leaps. A flash of silver arcs through the air. You don't need to look. You already know. The night deepens around you like ink soaking through silk. You're lying flat now, back to warm stone stars above you, sharp and endless. Dionysus hasn't moved much. He's still reclining like a bored deity in a play no one dared to direct. Only now he's telling stories again, whispered ones. Half for you, half for himself. He talks about dolphins, not the pirates-turned kind, but dolphins as they were after. What they became, what they meant. You sit up slowly, elbows propped behind you, listening as the breeze picks up the rhythm of his words. You learn that the Greeks saw dolphins as sacred, not just sacred blessed. Children of the sea and sky messengers between realms, friends of Apollo and Poseidon alike. Sailors who spotted them believed the voyage would be safe. They'd sing to them, offer them bread. Some claimed dolphins could understand music. Others believed they carried the souls of the dead. One mainstream fact in ancient Delphi, home of the famous oracle Apollo himself, was said to have first arrived in the shape of a dolphin. That's actually where the name Delphi comes from. Delphis, the Greek word for dolphin. So, in a way, dolphins weren't just a footnote in myth. They were myth. One old vase painting shows a pod of dolphins circling a ship under starlight, while a man on deck plays a lyre. Another mosaic from the island of Delos shows dolphins leaping beneath a god with ivy in his hair. And you know exactly who that is. Dionysus looks pleased. The poets always got it, he says. They knew you had to dress truth in metaphor, otherwise people just argue about it. You ask if he misses them, the pirates. He shrugs. I remember the moments, not the names. You wonder if the dolphins remember. Not in words maybe, but in instinct. Do they feel a tug in their bellies when they near a ship? Do they dream in rope and wine and regret? Fringe thinkers have written pages about this. One essay argues that dolphins follow boats because they're drawn to the shape of a god's revenge. Another paper from a now-retired professor suggests dolphins aren't animals at all, but vessels for discarded myth stories the world forgot swimming just below the surface. You like that one? Dionysus tosses a pebble into the darkness. It skips across unseen water. You hear a distant splash, then a beat later an answering chirp from somewhere offshore. A dolphin. Still here. Still listening. He leans his head back and sighs. They were greedy, yes, but not cruel. Not truly. They just saw something divine and thought they could sell it. You murmur, people still do that. He nods. And I still notice. That sends a shiver down your spine, not from fear, from recognition. You ask him if he would do it again. The vines, the bear, the wine, the change. He pauses, looks at you sideways. Would you? You don't answer, because that's not a question for tonight. Instead, you let the quiet wrap around you. The shrine hums faintly. Somewhere beneath your feet, the earth remembers every laugh, every cry, every leap into the sea. You close your eyes and listen as Dionysus hums the same low tune from before. It's not a song you've heard before, but something about it feels like a lullaby from a place you've never been but somehow miss. When the dolphins leap again, you don't open your eyes. You just smile. Morning creeps in softly without fanfare. The kind of dawn that tiptoes over the hills and pretends it didn't wake you. The shrine around you is bathed in pale gold. Dionysus is already up, pacing slowly along the edge of the cliffside path, his thyrsus dragging a faint groove in the dirt behind him. He looks peaceful, and also slightly smug. You stretch joints cracking like old amphorae and follow. Let me guess you say victory lap. He grins. You could call it that. Because here's the thing. Dionysus didn't just sail off into myth after turning pirates into dolphins. He told everyone about it. Or rather, he let the story tell itself. You pass through villages where the vines now curled just a little too perfectly around the doorframes. Towns where bakers swear their wine jugs refill when they sleep. Markets where traveling performers wear dolphin masks and act out the tale like sacred gossip. He doesn't correct them. You stop in one town square where a group of children are playing Catch the God. One is blindfolded and twirling, clutching a pine cone on a stick. Another pretends to be a dolphin flopping dramatically on the ground. An old woman watches with folded arms and mutters, "Back in my day, we prayed properly." Dionysus laughs. They remember. That's what matters. You continue on. And here's what you notice. Wherever Dionysus goes now, people behave a little differently. Bartenders leave offerings, tiny cups of wine in corners. Sailors whisper prayers before setting sail. Even shepherds carve little dolphins into fence posts for luck. Historians still debate how much of this was organic. Did people really fear Dionysus that much? Or did the priesthood just get creative with PR? Some argue that the myth spread as a warning: respect the gods, especially the wild ones. Others say it spread because people wanted to believe in a world where justice had flair, where pirates were turned into dolphins, not just arrested and forgotten. You pass a mural painted on a crumbling villa wall. It shows a ship half covered in ivy with dolphins leaping below it and a glowing figure at the mast. Someone has scratched 3 words underneath. He saw me. Dionysus pauses when he sees it. Doesn't speak. Just nods once, almost imperceptibly. Do they all become stories, you ask? All what? Everyone you touch. He smiles faintly. Only the ones who deserve it. There's a temple in the next town newly built. Carved columns, fresh plaster ivy, still reluctant to climb the walls. You peek inside, no altar, just a stage. It clicks. This isn't a temple for worship, it's a theater, and they're about to perform his play. You settle in among the quiet morning crowd. Fishermen still holding nets. Market girls in aprons. One old man with a sleepy goat on his lap. The curtain rises, a flute begins, and the first word spoken on stage. Once a man walked alone by the sea. The play isn't accurate exactly. Dionysus laughs at the bad wig and incorrect boat size. But the story is intact, the warning is loud. And the dolphins, they get applause. A few rows over, you see a child gripping a dolphin, carving so tightly their knuckles are white. The story has legs now. It swims. You step outside after the curtain falls and realize Dionysus is gone again. No footprints. No glint of gold. just a breeze that smells faintly of wine and salt. You close your eyes, and you swear you hear a splash. The path winds away from the theater town and melts back into scrubland olive trees thin. The soil grows sandy, and somewhere far off, gulls laugh like they're in on the joke. You follow the coast now, alone for the first time in what feels like days. Dionysus has disappeared again. No parting words, no dramatic flourish, just gone. As usual. But his story, still here, echoing through your thoughts like flute notes on the breeze. And as you walk, you start to notice how many versions of the story there actually are. Because this is the part historians can't quite pin down. Some say Dionysus turned the pirates into dolphins to show mercy. Others say it was vengeance disguised as poetry. Still others say it never happened at all. That it was metaphor. That Dionysus, god of ecstasy and illusion, never needed to do it. He just needed people to believe he did. You reach a weathered town carved into the cliffs. Sea-worn stone steps, salt-whitened houses, a market shaded by tattered cloth. You find an old man selling sea charms, dolphin figurines, carved shells, little clay amphorae, no bigger than your thumb. Dionysus, he croaks as you pick one up. You know the story? You nod. He leans forward. Which version? You hesitate. He chuckles. See, that's how he wins. He tells you his version anyway, and the pirates weren't pirates at all, but actors. Traveling performers who mocked Dionysus in a drunken play. When the god saw himself turned into farce, he made them live as jesters forever, eternal leapers flipping through the waves, laughing without breath, grinning without speech. You ask, but dolphins aren't sad. He shrugs. Maybe not to you. You leave a coin on the stall and move on. Down the road, another story drifts to you. This one from a painted tile set into a wall. In it, Dionysus weeps on the shore after the transformation, not because he regrets it, but because he loved them briefly, because they danced well, because even fools can be beautiful for a moment. Fringe theories go deeper. One ancient manuscript, badly translated, barely legible, claims the pirates were symbols of resistance, that they didn't try to rob Dionysus, they tried to capture him and stop the spread of his cult. Their ship was a weapon. Their ropes were suppression. So when he turned them into dolphins, it wasn't punishment. It was absorption. He took their opposition and turned it into worship. You sit on a crumbling seawall. Now the sun behind you, sea spray, flecking your arms. Somewhere in the water, a dolphin arcs high into the air and spins twice before vanishing into the foam. You can't help but wonder, did it leap because it remembered or because it didn't? There's something about Dionysus that infects memory. He's not like Athena, whose stories are carved clean into marble, or like Ares, whose battles are numbered and named. Dionysus blurs, shifts, tricks. You leave one version of him behind only to meet another the next day wearing someone else's face. And that's the point, because he's not the god of wine. Not just, he's the god of change, of what happens when you stop pretending to be in control, of what you become when you let go. You rest your head against the sun-warmed stone. A seagull lands beside you. It tilts its head, squawks once, and waddles away, like it has no time for poetic thoughts. You exhale. Then, just as your eyes begin to flutter closed, a familiar voice murmurs behind you. Ready for the ending yet? You turn. And there he is again, barefoot, smirking, as if he hadn't just vanished for an entire section. Almost, you say. He grins. Good, he replies, because I've got one more twist. You rise from the seawall, brushing salt from your hands. Dionysus walks beside you now, whistling a tune that doesn't follow any scale you've ever heard. You ask him what the twist is. He just says, not yet, and skips a rock across a tide pool, like it's a drumbeat cue you're too mortal to understand. You follow him inland again. But this time the trail seems unfamiliar. Though you've walked this coast for days now, it's changed somehow. The shrubs are taller. The air feels warmer. Time has curled in on itself. And that's when he tells you, the dolphins, they weren't the first. You stop. He's still walking. You heard me, he calls over his shoulder. They weren't the first. The myth, he says, is just one version. The one that stuck. The one that poets liked best. But before the pirates, there were others who tried to bind the unbindable. Kings who mocked him. Priests who banned his name. Cities that threw his followers in prison for dancing too freely in public squares. They didn't turn into dolphins, he says with a shrug. But they disappeared too. You catch up, eyes narrowed. What happened to them? He spins his thyrsus like a baton. They're stories now. Morals in plays. Ghosts in the background of cautionary tales. Nothing makes you immortal like being wrong in public. You want to press him further, but he waves you into a clearing. There's a statue at the center. Not one of him, but of a man mid-fall, arms reaching toward the sea face, frozen in surprise. Around the base, dolphins carved in a circle, chasing one another, endless. Beneath it, an inscription chipped and barely legible. He believed too late. You sit at the base and watch as Dionysus begins circling the statue, slowly, eyes distant. This is where the story ends for most people, he says. The dolphins leap. The ship sails away. Everyone claps. But that's not how stories really end, is it? Because in the real world, myths ripple. They echo. They sneak into dreams, symbols, tattoos, bumper stickers. They adapt. And Dionysus, he makes sure they never die. One mainstream fact, long after ancient Greece faded, Dionysian themes lived on. In Roman bacchanalia, in medieval mystery plays, in Mardi Gras, in rave culture, in that moment when you lose yourself on a dance floor and feel both infinite and slightly out of breath. Some fringe scholars even argue that Dionysus was an early symbol of creative resistance, that his myths were coded language for marginalized people, women, outsiders, queer folks, anyone whose joy was considered too loud, too strange, too dangerous. You ask him if that's true. He tilts his head. Do you want it to be? You nod. Then it is. That's his whole thing. Myth as mirror, belief as performance. You sit in the quiet for a while, letting it all unfurl: vines, pirates, theater masks, dolphins, and the hum of a god who isn't just worshipped, but felt. Eventually, he sits beside you, cross-legged, hands resting on his knees. They always want to know the moral, he says. You look at him. Wait, so here it is, he says. Don't tie up strangers who might be gods. You laugh. That's it. That's enough. And maybe it is. Because that rule, ridiculous as it sounds, could have saved an entire ship of fools. He rises, dusts off his robes, and stretches like a cat in the sun. You look up at him. Where will you go now? He grins. Wherever someone's about to forget. And just like that, he's gone again. The statue stands quiet. The dolphins, frozen in stone, spin their perfect circle. You don't need to chase him. Because now, you remember, you descend slowly, following the same trail you once climbed, but now the hills feel softer beneath your feet. The sea glints through cypress branches, distant and forgiving. You pass places that once felt charged, shrines, ruins, lonely theaters, and realize they're quieter now. Not because they've lost their meaning, but because you understand it. Dionysus doesn't appear again, not physically, but the space beside you holds his echo. And the dolphins. You see them every so often, breaking the surface far out to sea, trailing behind fishing boats, vanishing as quickly as they come. Like punctuation marks at the end of sentences you've only just learned how to read. You stop at the final overlook. It's the same one where this all began: the olive trees, the low stone bench, the salty wind that makes your eyes sting just enough to feel something. And from here, the sea rolls on endlessly, wine dark and secretive. You sit. You breathe. You remember everything. You remember Semele struck down by lightning and still holding on to love. You remember the child sewn into a god's thigh, the baby cradled by nymphs, the wild road trip across Asia, the ecstatic rites, the masks, the bear on the boat, the leap. You remember that moment when ropes fell away like silk, when vines erupted from planks, when pirates realized too late what they'd dared to do. And you remember the dolphins, not as punishment, but as transformation. Because that's what Dionysus does. He changes you. He doesn't ask permission. He doesn't knock. He arrives as a stranger dances barefoot across your expectations and leaves you blinking at what's left behind, if anything at all. Historians still argue whether the myth was ever meant to be taken seriously. Whether Dionysus turning pirates into dolphins was a metaphor, a parable, or just ancient poetic nonsense gone wild. But here's what they miss. It doesn't matter. Because tonight, somewhere across the world, someone will dream of the sea and wake up hearing laughter just beneath the waves. Because someone right now is dancing in a crowd and forgetting where they end and music begins. Because someone somewhere still whispers his name without knowing why. You close your eyes. Let the wind carry that hum across your skin. The faint smell of crushed grapes and moss. A giggle that might not be your own. And in that final moment you understand, you don't survive Dionysus, you become part of him. The sea grows darker now, but it's not frightening. Just deep, just full. You lie back on the old stone bench, the warmth of the day still soaked into its surface. Your breath slows. Your body softens. The vines don't move anymore, but they don't need to. The story has ended, but the echo continues. Let the memory drift like seawater around your toes. Let it fade without fear. You're not meant to carry the whole myth, just a piece. Just enough to remind you that wonder isn't something you chase. It's something you remember how to let in. The dolphins are quiet now. The god has gone. And you're still here, still breathing, still full of something you didn't have before. Maybe it's wine. Maybe it's laughter. Maybe it's the space left behind by a story that wrapped around you like ivy and then gently unwound. So rest. No more questions tonight. Let the waves keep their secrets. Let the wind carry your weight for a while. Let your dreams stretch long and silver and silent, spiraling upward like dolphins through starlight. And if you hear a flute in your sleep, faint off-key, half joking, you already know who's playing.